C.B. Lyall is British but has lived in New York, India, Belgium, and Hong Kong. She has two published novels, The Virus of Beauty, Book 1, and The Veil of Corruption, Book 2 in her young adult fantasy series. She's also a contributor in 25 Servings of Soup, that's SOOP, volumes 1 and 2. She is currently working on the last book in her fantasy series. CB, over to you.
Good evening. I'm reading from The Virus of Beauty, Book 1. This is an excerpt from Chapter 3. It's set in the Galveri souvenir store in Hong Kong. A loud croak sounded from the bell above the shop door, instead of its usual soft, magical jingle. Wilf hadn't expected anyone to venture down the narrow street to the store. He tugged a clean T-shirt over his head, smoothed his close-cropped hair into place, and eased the stool out from behind the counter. He winced as the legs grated over the wooden floorboards, but kicked back against the wall, lifting the front legs. A woman stomped down the centre aisle towards him. She wore purple silk slippers that sounded more like soccer cleats marching across metal basement hatch. She stopped at the counter and cleared her throat. He took a look in her leaden complexion and doughy features. They were enough to make him recoil, but the enormous wart at the end of a long-beaked nose held him transfixed. He gasped. She pursed her lips and her eyes flashed. Wilf's brow furrowed. She reminded him of someone, but he couldn't quite remember who. Beautiful, isn't it? Not many are blessed with a wart of such magnitude, she said. The hairs on his arms all stood up at the sound of her voice. Have we met? Not that I can recall, she said. You're probably right. I think I would remember seeing you before. He tried to avoid meeting her hypnotic brown eyes. They seemed like mud pools wanting to suck him in. Is that so? His stool rocked and forced him to stand. Ermintrude Wakefield is the name. She glanced around the small store. You may call me Witch Wakefield. Wilf braced himself against the wall and shoved his ringed hand into his pocket. His heart raced. The Wizard Council had dispatched this witch to collect him. Well, it didn't make any difference who they sent. He wasn't leaving Hong Kong. Now, I don't usually deal with wizards. Her face wrinkled in the way Myra's did when she took his soccer kit out of the bag for washing. But this time I have to. So, show me the rest of the place. We'll need your father's journal, and then we'll be on our way. There's sure to be a portal nearby we can use. I can't abide taking passengers on my broom, although I'd rather not have to use the warehouse portals up in Sha Tin. But if needs must, there's been some mistake. Wilf could hear the panic in his voice. I'm not a wizard. That was my dad. He died, evaporated, a few weeks ago. Her shadow towered over him. I don't have time for games with a junior wizard. Ermintrude stared him down before turning to survey the store. There wasn't much to investigate. It was possible, with a few steps in both directions, to touch a wall. The small counter protecting Wilf stood in the middle of the back wall. Where's the workshop? Workshop? There isn't one, he said, waving his left arm. Except for a closet through that door, he pointed at a paint-chipped door behind him, and a washroom through the other. The workshop had disappeared. Even Myra hadn't been able to find the way in. He'd heard her knocking on all the walls in the closet, but to no avail. The entrance vanished the moment his father evaporated. Ermintrude wiggled her fingers towards the main door. It locked. The sign flicked to closed, and the shutters came down with a clatter. Hey, you can't do that. I'm not talking about what normals can see. She took off her jacket and hung it on the wall next to the counter. I want to see the wizard workshop located within these premises. She looked around warily, as if checking that no one else was listening. This is a gift store? Ermintrude rubbed her square chin. Wilf winced at the sound, like a wire brush raking over metal studs. I've always thought wizards were a stubborn lot, she sneered, but most don't act habitually stupid. She reached across the counter, grabbed him by his shirt, and pulled him across the wooden surface. I'm sure your father taught you that a witch's facial appearance corresponds to the amount of power she wields. Your idea of beauty, in my case, fled screaming a long time ago. I'd advise you not to misjudge my ability or temperament. She let him go, and he fell back against the wall, knocking the stool over. Her jacket inched away from him. Ermentrude paced, and the displays crowded into a corner. I wish they'd sent someone else. Why do I always get the hopeless cases? There isn't time for this. I should be... She stopped in front of Wilf. Well, we'd better get started, since they did send me and I'm here. She raised her fingers at him and wiggled them. Where was the workshop before it disappeared? Warm air wrapped around him, soothing him. That closet, Wilf said, pointing. Ermentrude pushed past him and stepped into the closet. Wilf shook his head as the strands of magic released him. He rushed after her. Typical, hiding in plain sight, so like a wizard. She tapped the closet's back wall and then caught Wilf's right hand. You do have your father's ring, she said, placing Wilf's hand on a black wood knot. Just a minute. He tried to pull away, but Ermentrude held him in a firm grip. Groans sounded from deep within the wall, and the knot expanded into a yawning black hole. The air shimmered, and a staircase with carved handrail popped into place. Look at that workmanship. She ran her hand over the wooden carvings. You don't see skill like that anymore. Wilf moved to step over the threshold, but Ermentrude knocked him back. Don't you know anything at all about decent magic? She asked, and tuttered. What do the runes say? He watched the symbols shimmer into existence around the entrance. How should I know? Run your fingers over them and then tell me what comes into your mind. He'd always thought magic folk were half mad. This particular witch was fully certifiable. No, you're not tricking me into performing any kind of magic. Ermentrude's bag lifted off her shoulder, placed itself on the floor and opened. A scream jumped out and blasted Wilf full in the face. Torturing my patients is never a good idea. His ears rang from the deafening noise. Think of it more as a ritual than real magic. She softened the pitch of her voice. It's very important that I get into that workshop. You've heard of the pulch virus that's attacking witch magic. No, he shook his head. Your father's been trying to develop an antidote to cure those suffering from the virus. He contacted us on the day he evaporated, saying he'd made a breakthrough. Ermentrude took a step closer to Wilf. I'm here to collect Reginald's journal. It's the only record of his findings. Sweat poured out of Wilf as the hot waves of Ermentrude's frustration flowed over him. Do you want a large number of deaths on your conscience? I hope you enjoyed this reading. You can hear me read the first chapter and other short stories by visiting my website, cblyall.com. Book 1 and 2 are available to purchase in ebook and paperback, and the final book in the trilogy will be published in 2022. Thank you for listening.